Welcome, everybody, to session 3 of the Alma Analytics Become an Expert series. This is Yoel Cortex, Senior Librarian at Ex Libris. And let's just see where we are now in the session. I'm sure you all have this link, but I'm going to send it out in the chat right now, just in case for whatever reason you don't have it, although I know people have registered from this page. So this is the official Analytics Become an Expert page. We have the recordings, links to the recordings for the previous sessions. We're now on session 3. We began with a general overview and introduction to analytics. That was 2 weeks ago. And then last week, we did physical inventory and fulfillment in Alma Analytics. And now, week 3, we're doing electronic inventory, usage, and acquisitions in Alma Analytics. I want to give a general introduction when we say usage. We're talking here about counter usage. I know some people are very familiar with the counter usage, some less. So I will be discussing a little bit about what is the counter usage and how we can see it. So let's jump right in and let's begin. So we're going to begin with the electronic inventory and usage. So the electronic resources are analyzed in 2 different subject areas, and let's go take a look at them. We're going to come into analytics. So I'm using that new interface that we pointed out in the previous 2 sessions. You can all switch to this new interface. If there happens right now to be anybody in this current session who was not in one of the previous sessions, I will show very briefly how to switch to this new interface here. I'm going to switch to the old interface and then back to the new interface in order to show how it works. So if a user clicks on the top right, the icon next to his or her name, I'm now on the top on the second from left icon. And from there, I'm going to click the feature rollout configuration. And where it states here, new analytics, if you toggle this to off, then I will have now the old analytics interface inside Alma. So now if I click analytics, I see this, the design analytics, data visualization, etc. And I'm going to come again to the icon with my name, again go to the feature rollout configuration, switch this over to the new analytics, and now I have the new interface. So let's come in now to analytics. And now that I have the new interface, it's not going to be called design analytics. It's going to be called access analytics. So let everything load. There we go. Access analytics. And from here, everything is the same. The only thing that has changed with that new interface is what's in Alma, not what's in analytics. And by the way, on March 22nd, I believe it's March 22nd, let's take a brief look. We're having a session here on that new analytics interface. It's part of the 2023 Roadmap webinar series. And in this Roadmap webinar series on March 22nd, the new and improved Alma Analytics interface inside Alma. So you're all cordially invited to join that session as well. I will send the link to this page out in the chat also, just in case for whatever reason no one has it, someone doesn't have it, and that covers us for our administrative needs. So let's start by taking a brief look at some of the default reports and dashboards. But before that, I want to point something out here. If I say create and analysis, there are 2 subject areas that include the usage information for electronic resources. We have the e-inventory, which we'll be looking at more in depth throughout the day, throughout the session. Inside the e-inventory subject area, we have a subfolder here, which includes cost per use information and general usage information. And that usage information is from the counter reports, which we'll be discussing shortly. So here, for example, we have usage. We're going to talk about these later, but this is the usage. Now, the usage here is for resources which are in Alma. Now, that sounds trivial. Someone might say, well, of course it's for things in Alma. I'm using Alma Analytics. That's correct. It is trivial in a way to say this is for resources in Alma. However, we have another subject area here called the usage data, create analysis, and we have usage data. Now, in this usage data subject area, we have all of the information that was loaded via the counter reports. And there are cases where institutions receive counter reports from vendors and they don't, for whatever reason, have the same resource in Alma. So in the usage data subject area, there will be cases where there's a title which you don't have in Alma. And we're going to talk more about that as we go on. But those are the two subject areas that include usage data. It's the e-inventory subject area, and it's the usage data subject area. So let's begin. We're going to start looking at some default reports and dashboards. And we're going to begin with the electronic cost usage dashboard and another one called usage via counter reports. So let's start looking at those right now. We will go to the catalog so that we can navigate through the system. And as we've been mentioning in the previous sessions, we're going to go to the Alma folder because the Alma folder is the out-of-the-box reports and dashboards that are used for Ex Libris to supply to the institutions, and the institutions can use those as they are or save them locally. So we're going to start with the first one, which is cost per use via counter reports, e-inventory, and acquisitions data. Now, I know that's a long name, and on purpose we gave it that long name because there's a lot of different usage. There's usage from the counter reports, usage that's combined with acquisitions data. There's even usage from fulfillment because that's the usage of physical inventory. There's also digital usage. So we're being very specific here. So let's take a look at that. We will expand that folder. We're under shared folders, Alma. I'll make that a tad bigger. Shared folders, Alma, cost per use via counter reports, e-inventory, and acquisitions data. And we'll open that dashboard here and let's take a look. So we're in the electronic cost usage dashboard. And we're not going to look at all of the tabs here, but we will look at the titles tab. So what do we have here? It's defaulting to the previous fiscal period up on top here. However, a user can choose a different fiscal period. The reason it's defaulting to the previous fiscal period is because if we want to look at usage, we need to look at a full range. And the counter reports, by the way, are usually supplied by the vendor and then uploaded about a month after the actual usage. And so if we look at an entire previous fiscal year, we can see a whole pattern, an entire year where we have the summers and the breaks and the busy times for the exam period, etc. So this is listing each title. In this case, the top 10, each title, the electronic collection that it's part of, the platform that it's part of, the total usage, the total cost, and the total cost per use. Now, when we're talking about the usage, now we're going to go a little bit more in depth here. So I'm going to look at an actual counter report because now we've just been talking theoretical about it. Now, this is a counter report. It's in a format called JSON. And there are various measures in a counter report. For example, total item requests. I'm going to make that larger so everybody can see it better. Total item requests, unique title requests. Every type of counter report has different measures. We're not going to do a whole session just on what is counter right now, but within the framework and within the context of the reports that we're showing, this is an example of a counter report with a title and a publisher on a year of publication and then the usage. And this is a extremely long report. It's just an example that I showed here, and we're going to talk a little bit more about these soon. Suffice to say that this is where the usage comes from the counter reports. Let's now come back here. And so that's where that usage is from. And that's where the platform is from. They're all from the counter report. Where is my counter report? One moment, please. Here we go. It's all from this counter. Here we have a platform here. And then we have the usage. And same thing here in the analytics. We have a platform and we have a usage. Cost is coming from the invoice line of the invoice that is related to the purchase order line of either the collection, if it's if the portfolio is part of a collection. If it's a standalone portfolio, it'll come right from the purchase order line of the portfolio. Okay, so then we have the same thing in a graph. We've got it in a table format. We've got it in a graph format. And that's the titles. Then we have title details. And in the title details, we can search for a specific title, or we can search for words from specific titles. For example, I'm going to say I want all of the titles with the word nursing for the previous fiscal year. Now, when we're talking about cost per use, we may want to only get those that have usage or that have a cost. Because if not, it'll just always be zero. So we can say, has a cost, yes or no. Institutions have things in their repository which are not related to a purchase order line, and therefore the has cost would be no. So now I'm getting everything that has nursing in the title and has cost and has usage. So if we take, for example, the first one, accident emergency nursing, it's from the platform Science Direct, and this is the purchase order line. It cost $30.75. That's in the local currency, and it had a 16 usage. The cost divided by the usage is the cost per use. So it was used 16 times. We'll talk a little bit more about what does that mean, used. It was used 16 times. It cost $30.75, and therefore the cost per use is almost 2, because 16 is almost half of $30.75, 1.92. And that's throughout the entire system here. It's always the cost divided by the usage equals the cost per use. And I can sort this various ways. If I say sort descending, for example, on the cost per use, I'll have the most expensive ones on top. Okay, International Journal of Nursing Study Advantage cost 401 local currency units, and it was only used 0.6 times. Now, why would the usage be a fraction number? Because this may have been supplied by multiple platforms, and then it gets divided by the platforms. That's a whole nother topic. Now, to come back to the dashboard, and that's in many cases, not just the electronic cost per use, on the bottom, we can click return, and that brings us back. So now we're back. So those were the top 10 titles. I'm going to go back to the first tab. First tab was the top 10 titles by usage, and then the top 10 titles by cost per use. This is most used. So this graph here is looking specifically at usage. Also here you can see it's descending by the usage in the tables. Here it's descending by the cost, most expensive, just the cost. Then we saw the title details where we can search for specific titles. And then we have the continuous. Continuous, there are different types of purchase order lines, as many of you are aware. Typically, a purchase order line is divided between physical or electronic, and then between continuous or one-time. So we're talking here about electronic inventory of type 1 continuous, which is typically a journal, nearly always a journal, but not always. Somebody asks, how do you measure the usage of electronic resources? The usage of electronic resources, as we stated, is measured by the metrics that come in through the counter report. We opened a counter report here and we saw that it has metrics of total item requests, in this example, unique title requests. If somebody were to come, for example, to Google and say total item requests, counter, release 5, he or she will get a full description from Project Counter about what are those measures, what exactly does it measure, total item requests. After reading, she downloads the PDF. So after downloading a PDF, it went from 4 to 6. It says for 2 of the articles. So every time it's downloaded, we got another one. I'm not going to go through all of the details here. However, a basic search here will be able to explain it. Okay, it's by the counter standards. It's not a Ex Libris invention. So this is the continuous. All of the titles that came from a purchase order line of type continuous. We can see that this is journals, because typically journals is what's defined as continuous. The reason many of them all have the same price is because when there is a purchase order line on a collection level, the price of each portfolio is the total price divided by the number of portfolios. For example, if we have an electronic collection and it has 100 portfolios and the whole collection cost $500, then each portfolio would be 50, right? 500 divided, let's write that down just to make it a little clearer to everybody. If we were to have a electronic collection which cost 500, we'll say USD, we'll say 500 euro, and that electronic collection has 100 portfolios, then that would mean each portfolio would be 500 divided by 100 equals 5, correct? Yes. Okay, another chat came in, then I want to focus back onto the examples here. So another chat says, we have usage and usage data, but it doesn't appear in e-inventory. What could be wrong? It might be that in one place you're looking at one time period, and another place you're looking at a different period. That would be a possibility. And okay, let's go on. So, one time, same thing as what we talked about on the continuous. However, these are for purchase order lines that are one time. Typically, therefore, we would see here ones which are more focused on ebooks rather than journals. And we can see the first one, for example, is the YBP eBooks collection, ProQuest eBook Central, etc. And then the same thing here. We don't need to go through it. It's the same exact setup, the cost, the usage, the cost per use. Let's move to the platforms. It's possible to do an analysis according to the platforms. And if we do an analysis by the platforms, then we can see which platforms are the most used and which are the least used. And that can be useful for the collection development. And I'm going to send this link out. I saw somebody wanted the link that I got from the counter back here. So these are the most used platforms, least used platforms. And then in the table, we've also got the cost per use. Then we have the most expensive and least expensive platforms. And let's just look at one more tab here. Actually, let's move on already because we're already 21 minutes into the session. And now let's go look strictly at the usage. And by the way, all of this, I see someone is asking another question about which measurements do we use. So all of this, all of the questions about the cost per use, I would recommend in the developers network under blog, if you just write here, cost per use, you'll get full explanations on the cost per use. There's even a tag here. I'm going to go to the tag. So here, I'm going to send this link out, although everyone can get this from the developers network. And there we go. So this is, for example, how the cost per use is calculated with the platform field, why the usage may have decimal points. We pointed out a moment ago why it may have decimal points, how the resources match from the counter report to the resource in Alma. For example, this real actual counter report has an ISBN like this. It looks for the ISBN in Alma. If it doesn't find the ISBN, it looks for the title. If it doesn't find the title, it looks for the title from the purchase order line, etc. And all of that is explained there. And then a general overview of how it's determined. So everything is explained here. Okay, let's move on and let's go look at the usage data dashboard. That means we're not taking into account the cost usage, nor are we taking into account whether or not the resource is in Alma. So here we are, usage via counter reports, release 5. Why does it say release 5, by the way? About, I think around 2018 or so, the counter reports changed over to release 5. It used to be release 4. We fully support the release 5 already several years. And the release 4 and the release 5 were so different from each other that it wasn't worth trying to adapt the release 4 reports to release 5. It was just more logical to make everything new and call it release 5. And release 4 is really not used much anymore in any case. So here we have two reports. One is called monthly usage data. One is called usage via counter reports. Let's go take a look at the usage via counter reports. And so this is just pure data from the counter reports. It doesn't take into account any whether the resources in Alma or how much it cost or anything else. So let's start here with the trends by month. And I'm going to change this. Instead of this TR unique title requests, I'm going to change this to a different measure, which is going to be PRP1 searches platform. Now, if I didn't know what is the PRP1 searches platform, Let me do apply. I could come here and just say counter PR P1 searches platform. And that will bring me, here we are. We're in Project Counter. That's the official. Here's even frequently asked questions from EBSCO. Let's go see what they say. Here's a from support of ProQuest, and let's also go into the official Counter one. So here we looked for PRP1 searches platform. Searches platform. Sorry, I keep spelling wrong. There we are. Searches platform. So it's the searches conducted by the user on the platform level. Each user initiated search can only counted once. In other words, it's unique users searches. And this metric applies to platform reports and views. So the information is pretty available here. Let's see here also, just as another little test. Okay, searches platform, here we go. Searches conducted by users and captured at the platform level. PR1, that's what we're using now, PR1. That's a platform report. There are platform reports, database reports, journal reports, etc., book reports. Okay, so we changed ours to PRP1. And we see the trend, and it's a typical trend. We see it going up April, May, down for the summer, back up, and then down again for the winter. September, end of August, September, it looks like a big peak. And let's move on there. So that's the first one, the trends by month. Then we've got the most used titles. And I'm going to put this back to the default here, reset to the default, because when I'm looking for most used titles, platform request isn't really the way to go. TR unique title requests. Let's go look one more time. TR unique title requests. So if we say counter TR unique title requests. Ebook reporting, frequently asked questions, understanding investigations and requests. So unique, where we chose here, unique title requests right here. If we look here, unique title requests, a number of times an ebook was accessed in a single patron session. Peer usage. So that's what we got here. So the biggest one, how the endocrine system works. In 2022, 2,824 times a user accessed that ebook. And then all the rest there. This is just looking at the most used. Then we've got the most used platforms. So again, if we're talking about platforms here, I will change this back to the PRP1. I could leave the unique title request if that's what interests me. However, I'll go back to the PR searches platform. And let's see what we got here. So our most used platforms here for 2022 was Scopus, and then ProQuest eBook Central, New England Journal of Medicine. Then we can get that also by publishers. For publishers, we might want to look, not at the platforms, we might want to look, for example, as the TRB1 and TRJ1. TR is a title request, and B1 is for books, total item requests, and J1 is for journals. TRJ1, that's title requests for books, title requests for journals. Apply, and let's see what we got. Okay. So Elsevier, by far the most used publisher in this demo environment, that is. Okay. So I think that covers there. What I'd like to do now to show more about the counter is create a report for the most used publishers in 2022. And we'll use the TRB1 book request, which I think we already, let's do a TRB1 book request here because that's what we're going to use just so we can see what it is. TRB1 book request, here we are. And so here we are, a BR TRB1. I'm going to skip that one because that's the release 5. TRB1 book request, we'll even say counter 5. Oh, it already even gives us right there. Counter 5 TRB1 requests. Again, this isn't necessary every time to do. However, because we're showing it and because I see in the chat some questions coming out, I'm showing how someone can come and look at it. So we said B1 requests, book requests. We'll even, sorry, I keep spelling wrong. Okay, unique title investigations, unique item investigations, number of unique titles investigated by a user, etc. So let's take a existing report and let's change it around a little bit rather than making our own. So we all remember now, I'm going to close all of these extra tabs for a moment. And okay, we all remember from previous sessions where the default out-of-the-box reports are. They are under the Alma folder, and then under the specific topic, and then in the reports. So right now I'm in the dashboards. I'll go up a level here using the third icon from the top left, go up, and now we'll come into the reports. So we have one here called Most Used Publishers. That was the one, we saw this a moment ago inside the dashboard. Now, if we open it up from here, Most Used Publishers, it may take a very, very long time to load. It may even fail because now it's running without one of the prompts. At a later session, we'll be talking about dashboards and prompts, etc. But right now, it did run, but right now it's not filtering by fiscal year 2022 or any other fiscal year because I just ran it straight from the catalog. If we come to the criteria tab, for example, we'll see that the usage date year is prompted. That means it appears in the prompt in the dashboard. Again, we'll talk more about dashboards another time, but I don't want it prompted, so I can change that to a specific year. So I'm going to change the filter here by clicking the little pencil next to it. And instead of saying is prompted, I will say usage date year is equal to is in, and let's say I want 2022. So we'll say 2022. By the way, I could have also used this filter here under the usage date. There's a usage date filter here, and I could drag that in and say I want filter. Usage date filter is equal to, and then say I want the previous year. Then I can get rid of this one where I hard coded it. And then even if I run it next year, it'll always be the previous year. Let's make a few more changes here. So we changed the date to be the previous year. For the material type indicator, here it says prompted. Let's change this material type indicator to be, again, is equal to is in. And let's take now the TRB1 total item requests. We're not going to go look for it again on the counter sites. What else do we want to change here? Let's get rid of this filter about the top 10 because we want to get all of them now. And let's go to the results now. Let's make sure we know what we got here. Publisher is not empty, not none. Previous year is the usage date. Material type indicator equals that. Okay, let's go to the results. We're going to have that graph, which is really no longer appropriate if we have the top 10. Somebody asked, by the way, if you want to see data other than in the top 10, do you need to go into the counter report or can Alma show this? I think you mean, do you need to go into the analytics report? Well, I went into the analytics report already here and I removed the filter is in top 10 as we did a moment ago. There is no filter here anymore is in top 10. I had a filter here. I'm just going to add it to show where we said is in top 10. And then I got rid of it here. There is no report inside Alma, which is top 10 usage by something. It's in analytics. It can be accessed from Alma, but it's in analytics. So we no longer need this table, this graph, excuse me. So I'll get rid of that. We don't need to display the usage usage filter. It's always the same. So I'm going to get rid of that. Back to the criteria tab, and we're just going to delete the usage date filter. And I will already save this. And I think I'll put it in my folders for now. So we will say most used publishers in previous year. Great. And this is already sorted. I'm going to unsort it just to show how to sort it. I want to sort this descending by the usage measures because I want to see the biggest usage on top. So if we say sort descending, we have a little indication here that it's descending. And then we've got the table sorted descending by the usage. So we see here who are the biggest publishers. And the biggest publisher here is Taylor and Francis Group right here. Now let's say I want to know why is there 72,990 there in the previous year? I want to go take a look at the counter reports. Again, it's not mandatory to do this. It doesn't really add any value about knowing what your usage is, but it is nice to understand how the system works. So there's a way to know what was the counter report which was loaded into Alma. There's a whole way that the counter reports are loaded into Alma. There's something called sushi harvesting, or it can be done manually. So I'm going to take just this publisher, Taylor and Francis Group. It's back in the criteria tab. I'm going to filter by the publisher equals Taylor and Francis Group. And then I'm going to include the ID of the counter report from where this data comes from. It's going to be several counter reports. So we have a folder here called load file. This is very nice for, I don't want to call it debugging because it's not that there's bugs, but it's a useful way of discovering how Alma works regarding usage. So within this load file folder, I'm going to drag in here the load file ID and the load file name. So this is the ID and the name of the counter reports. It's still sorted by the usage measures total. So if I take this load file ID and I want to see this actual report, I can do that. With inside Alma, under acquisitions, under import, we have load usage data. This load usage data is a section where the institution can either manually load counter reports or see the details of all of the counter reports which were loaded into Alma. And from here, I can search by this same load file ID here, this load file ID. I can search for this inside Alma and then download it and see what are these 14,146 usages. So within this load file ID, I'm going to search for that ID that I just took from the analytics report. That might actually be the same example I already looked at. I'm going to take the next one, just so I have a different one. So I'll download this one. And here it is. I can see when it was loaded. And I'm going to download. Okay, so here it is downloading. The Counter Release 5 reports are in a format called JSON. JSON can be opened with various softwares. I have an add-in here on my Mozilla. So we have a section here called Report Items. And for example, here on the first one, I can see that this is from the ProQuest eBook Central platform, and then the various details on it. I can also view this as raw data, and then there's something here called Pretty Print, which puts it into a different format here. So this is the various information. For example, I can see how many unique title requests there were, how many total item requests, and that happens to be for a title called For Space. Someone asked what the add-on I have on is. I'm really not sure, but here's my extensions. I don't remember which one it was called. I could search for it or something, Jason. One of these. Sorry, I don't remember exactly which one it was called. Okay, in any case, I think we've done enough about for the context of what we're doing here. Enough about what is the counter report, etc. So we got the usage now straight from the counter report. Let's create another report, because creating the reports also gives us more information about the subject areas. And it's not just usage. We want to know many things about electronic resources. So let's say we want to create a report now by date of how many portfolios get activated in a specific electronic collection. So let's take the collection eBook Central Perpetual DDA. I'm going to come over here and say electronic collection name. And let's say I want to look at eBook Central Perpetual DDA and subscription titles. And I want to know within this electronic collection, this one here, how many portfolios were activated and when. So let's first of all make a report in the e-inventory subject area. So we'll say create analysis. And we'll choose the e-inventory subject area. And let's say now we want to display some fields here. So we want the electronic collection public name, that's for sure. So we'll come to the electronic collection folder, and we'll get the electronic collection public name. Here we go. And let's get from the activation date here, let's get the year And let's also get the month key. Now, last week we also pointed out that the advantage of using the month key, the key is a number like 01 for January, 02 for February, 03 for March, etc., is that it's easy to sort. Because when we have the numerical, the alpha name like January, February, March, it won't sort chronologically, it will sort alphabetically. And let's also get the number of portfolios. So within the portfolio folder, we'll take the number of available portfolios. And let's filter by that specific collection. So we'll say filter on the electronic collection public name. Let's click this little search button here. That makes it a little easier. And let's say I'll get all of those with the word DDA in there. And I'll take this one here. Okay, so I've got a basic report. It is filtering by a specific electronic collection. It's displaying the electronic collection public name, the portfolio activation year, portfolio activation month, and how many portfolios were in each of those time periods. So let's go to the results. So here we have each year, each month, and how many available portfolios were activated then. Now, a couple of things to learn more about analytics. I really don't need this so wide. Just for a number, it's a very wide column because it's taking the space of the entire title. So we can make that smaller. If we come to the criteria tab, if we want to change the name and appearance of a column, of a field, we can edit the field. I'm going to say here, edit formula. So on the portfolio activation year, I'm clicking the edit formula. And then I can say custom headings, and I can also say contains HTML markup. We don't need the word portfolio. Activation year is enough. And if I put in here a BR, that's a break in HTML, it will break it. So it'll be 2 lines, which will be more narrow because I have this contains HTML. Same thing here on the activation month key. So I'll say edit formula. We don't need to call it portfolio activation month key. I think we can just call it activation month. And again, we'll put a line break in the middle. So that's already going to save us a lot of space. Let's go take a look here. Okay, and we also might want the total number of available portfolios here and not just per month. So there's 2 ways we can do that. First of all, let's save this. We'll say save as. I'll keep it in my folders. And I will call this ebook central number of public per year, and I won't give the date. Okay, so we've got it saved. Now, if I want to know the total number of portfolios, one way is from on the top here. If we right click, we can say show grand level totals after values. And then I've got the total here. I could also, I'm going to remove that. I'll say show none. I could say how much do I want how much was activated per year. So if I do the same activity here, let's do it on the public name first. If we say show subtotal after values. Okay, so we've got that total. Let's do this. Show One moment, please. Let me get rid of what I already had. That's the issue here. Let me change it all back to none. Okay. I'm going to do it on the year. Show subtotal after values. There we go. So now we can see per year how many there were. I did it from the year column. I did show subtotal after values. I'm going to remove that and show another way. We could put what's called a performance tile on the top, and that performance tile will include all of the portfolios or all of a specific measure. In our case, the specific measure is the number of available portfolios. So let's say we want to come here and say, I'm clicking right here again, where it says new view, this little picture of what looks like a bar graph. And one of the options here is a performance tile. Whenever a new view is added, it automatically goes to the bottom. Here it is. I'm going to drag it to the top. And it's kind of narrow. We can't read the whole number of available portfolios here. But if we click here on the view properties, we can make it wider. I'll make it 300 wide. So now we see that there are 671 portfolios. That should be the same number I'd get if I came here and I said show the grand total. Yes, 671. So that's an example of one electronic collection, how many portfolios are added each month, and what is the grand total. I'm going to stop and see if there's any questions here. Let's see, I'm going to the chat. Okay. Where in acquisitions in Alma do you see all of the Alma loaded files? Load Alma user. I'm not quite sure what you mean by load Alma user, but all of the loaded files can be seen from inside Alma, all of the loaded counter reports. So I'm going to say acquisitions, load usage data. This is where you can see all of the loaded files, and there are various ways that you can filter here. And let's just let that load a moment. Someone else asks, we have trouble with cost usage reports because electronic collections can change and names can change. How to group different versions of the same electronic collection. Within the framework of what we're doing today, I don't want to get into how to deal with electronic collections that change the names and the cost usage. We're already almost 2/3 done with this session, and we still have the acquisitions part. In any case, back to the question, where can you see all of the loaded users? Excuse me, loaded files. You can do it by here. You can do it by the uploading user. Maybe when you say where in acquisitions do you see the loaded Alma user? Maybe that's the name of your user. You can search here by the user that uploaded it. And you can filter by all different ways here. This is where you see the reports. Okay, I'm sorry we don't have time for every question on the list. Someone asks, if you want to see data other than the top 10, do you need to? Okay, we answered that one. You can just remove the is in top 10. Okay. All right, so let's move on now. The acquisitions. This session deals with both electronic inventory and acquisitions. So let's start again with some of the default reports and dashboards. So let's go back into analytics and let's go to catalog. May as well save that. Okay, so we're off to catalog now. And we're going to start again in the Alma folder because we're starting with the default out-of-the-box reports and dashboards. And the first folder here, simply because they appear in alphabetical order, is called Acquisitions. By the way, the session that there's three of these sessions. There's the one I've been doing, and then there's a later one, and then an even later one to cover 3 different time periods. The other sessions do a 5-minute break in the middle. I never offered a break. Do people need a 5-minute break in the middle? Whatever you decide. Anybody just send out a thing, yes, I want a break, no, I don't want a break. Okay, most people are saying no. In fact, everybody said no. So let's skip it. So under dashboards, we're going to start with the claims dashboard. Now, claims in Alma, just a general brief description, just like we had to briefly describe what is counter to give us some context. It's possible in Alma to run automatic claim jobs, which will send a letter to a vendor if either a physical item had an expected receiving date and didn't get received by that date, or if an electronic resource had an expected activation date and did not get activated before that date. What we have here is not the actual claims created by Alma and sent via letters to the vendor. Rather, we have lists. It explains exactly what it is. We have lists of, in this case, items, physical items, which have a purchase order line, and there's no receiving date in the purchase order line, meaning it was never arrived, it was never received. And the expected arrival date is within the past 2 years. We didn't go back further because, like I pointed out last time, sometimes things are in the system and the institution just leaves it there, and you don't want to keep getting the same thing all the time. If it hasn't arrived in more than 2 years and the institution still hasn't done anything with it, then maybe they're not going to do anything with it. So in any case, what we have here is all of those items that have a purchase order line for something that should have arrived. Just for the fun, I'm going to take this first one here, which was expected to arrive on May 3rd, 2021, and didn't arrive. It's called Dennis Kent, a retrospective. So if we pop into Alma here and I were to search for order lines, so there it is, Dennis Kent, a perspective. 0 items were received out of 1, and it's overdue. Let's just pop right back into there. So here, it says it was expected on May 3rd, 2021, and that's what we see here. So it's an alert for the institution to be able to know what should they be dealing with. Maybe they want to send to the vendor, maybe they want to cancel the order. Leaving it here isn't really going to cause any harm, except it's going to give inaccurate results. If somebody wants to know how many purchase order lines are in status sent, waiting for the material to arrive, and this one's been sitting here since May 2021, maybe it's not going to arrive. And it can be closed. It's an alert more than stating something has to be done. Then there's a breakdown just for journals. And when there are no journals, it gives a message. So here I don't have any journals, but it says there are no, let's let that load. There are no POLs from material type journal with all of those conditions. Then we get the same thing for portfolios. Portfolios is looking at the expected activation date. There is no receiving date in a portfolio. It's the activation date, and if the activation date passed. For example, this first one here. So global health diseases, programs, systems, and policies. This is a purchase order line which was created January 17th, 2022. It gives all of the purchase order lines created in the last 2 years for which there is an inactive portfolio. So this is a year and 2 months old, and it still doesn't have an activated portfolio. Again, perhaps it should either be closed or at least ask the vendor what's going on here. But again, it's just an alert and not something mandatory. Chronic resource was not activated. If we were to go in here, we would even be able to see if it has an electronic, an expected activation date. Yes, 17 January 2022. Okay, so that's the claims. There's also one by electronic collections. I think we get the point here, and they're well explained, all of the reports here of exactly what they do. Let's just go back into this one to see the explanation. Okay. They all explain exactly what they do. Let's take a look now at the fund reports. So there's another dashboard here called fund reports. And let's take a look here. So same thing here. If we look at the fund balances, we've got a description here. Now, this is looking at by default, it goes to the previous fiscal period. The current fiscal period. It says what is that fiscal period and what are the dates. Now, it's showing the available balance and the cash balance. And there's a description here because sometimes people get confused. The cash balance is how much has been allocated to the fund minus everything that's been expended. There's two concepts in acquisitions: expenditure and encumbrance. Encumbrance is when a purchase order line is made. There's a certain amount of funds that gets marked on the fund as encumbered. It doesn't come out of the fund yet because it hasn't been paid or expended. So it's encumbered. So something called the available balance is what is allocated to the fund minus both the expended and the encumbered, both what we've actually spent plus what we plan on spending, purchase order lines that haven't yet been paid for. The cash balance is what has been allocated minus what has actually been expended. So we have that here for each fund code. And it's possible to get just one specific fund code. For example, if I want just fund code 1 generic, I have a fund code here called 1 generic. So I can either type or choose from the pull down, and then I get just the details of that specific one. I'm going to go back here to get the default, which is all of them. Okay. And then we've got for them all. Now, some of them are red. The reason some of them are red here is because there's conditional formatting. If the percent spent YTD year to date, if the percent already spent is greater than 80%, as an alert to the person reading this, it's in red bold in order to say, wow, health science journals and law journals, I better be careful. I've already spent 95.55%. So that's the conditional formatting. All of these numbers here, we can see in a visualization format. I'm going to switch here to the Fund Balances Visualization tab. And now we can see it in a visual, which can sometimes help us understand better. So I actually have a very large available balance still, all together, not looking at one specific fund. And I also have a not too bad expenditure amount and encumbrance amount. If I were to go here to that law journals, I'm sorry about that, law apply. I must have written it wrong. Let's go to the search and let's go to law. Oh, it's a code. That's why. Okay. Okay, so here I can see, let's see something here. Sorry about that. I want to get that big 95.5% one here. So I will clear this. I'll put it back to the defaults. And we can sort descending now by percent spent year to date. We want to go reset to default values, apply. Okay. And now I'm going to sort this descending. So fund code LJ. All right. Now let's go to the fund balances visualization. Great. Now somebody asks, and this is a timely question. Somebody asks, for budget planning, how can I check with journal titles from a given fund have not yet been invoiced for this year? What are we still expecting to pay? So we have here a title by title list. This is in response to your comment. We have here a title by title list, which I just happen to be going here next anyway, so it turns out nice. And here I can see all of the titles, in this case for this specific fund code, and I can see what the status is for each of these purchase order lines. So you can see here each of the titles for that fund. I'm going to go back to your question because I think that exactly answers it. It states, for budget planning, how can I check with journal titles from a given fund? Here you go. This is titles from a given fund. So we've got them all here. All the details. If you want, you can export this, by the way, to Excel and then do more playing around on it. But this would be a nice place to start. By the way, we can also go directly to an invoice lookup. For example, this one is status. Let's get a closed one right here. So this one is closed. I'm going to take the purchase order line number here, and under invoice lookup, I can put in the purchase order line reference, do apply. Okay, this one doesn't have a invoice. Let's take another one. So I'm back at the title by title list. Let's change the status here. Get the closed ones on top. And I wanted one with an amount there. That would have helped me. So I'm going to take this one here. 27902. I can remember that without even copying it. Okay, so now I can, from here, get the invoice number for that specific purchase order line. Okay, so that's the acquisition fund reports. Let me go back to the chat and see if I missed anything. Someone says, is there an advanced version of this session? We already have experience with usage data and analytics. We're looking to solve specific problems. There is not an advanced version of this session. These sessions, just as an aside, generally are not for doing support or answering someone has a specific question and they're going to bring it to the webinar. If it's an institution specific question, this typically isn't the framework for that. We could, however, plan a more advanced session on this and go more in depth, assuming that people already have an in-depth background. Judging from the majority of the questions coming in, however, it doesn't appear that this is overly simple for at least a good amount of people who are viewing. So right now there is not a more advanced session, which is going to cover usage, cost per use, and acquisitions in e-inventory. We could consider that. Okay, let's go on here. So we also have a standard acquisitions dashboard. Let's go take a look at that. So again, we looked at the claims dashboard, we looked at the fund reports, then we've got this acquisitions dashboard. This is one of the first dashboards we ever made. It went through various iterations over the years. I'm going to change the fiscal year description here to be for the previous fiscal year 2022. And let's see what we got here. So I'm in the tab here, annual trend, and we can see that last year there was a big spike in expenditures between October and December, which is quite common. There are places who like to finish up their remaining balance before the end of the year. There's still some remaining allocation we can see here for some of the funds of 2022. Let's go take a look at the classifications. Classifications is the subjects. In this case, the LC classifications it's gonna load in a minute. So these are the topics that were ordered for fiscal year 2022. And the vast majority here being internal medicine. So it's possible to see what kind of things were being ordered, and that can also be changed according to not only the fiscal year, but the library. I'm going to choose here Central Library. And for Central Library, I no longer have internal medicine as the biggest one. Internal medicine is the third one. I have subject bibliography as the biggest. If I were to choose a medical library, then perhaps it would go back. There we go. It's back to internal medicine. So we can filter various ways here. I like the Central Library. So we're looking at fiscal year 2022 and what kind of subjects were ordered. Then let's move on to the acquisition method. And so this is what kind of acquisition methods am I using? Purchase at vendor system is the biggest here, and that's typically done when somebody orders outside of Alma, either, for example, via ProQuest or via Yankee Book Peddler, EBSCO, or Amazon. And then inside the purchase order line of Alma, it states purchase at vendor system rather than stating purchase, which would send a letter to the vendor, because there's no need for the letter to be sent to the vendor. Then we've got reporting codes. We used to have one reporting code, then 3 reporting codes. Now we have 5 reporting codes. So this is giving a breakdown of the reporting codes which were used. It's looking at all 5 of these reporting codes and seeing how many expenditures there are per those reporting codes. Let's just go by the PO lines by fiscal year and type and see what we've got here. So this is a breakdown of what kind of purchase order lines are we using here. So we've got electronic journal subscription, print journal subscription. The vast majority we can see are journal subscriptions. Occasionally we get an electronic book, and it just breaks down by the, we're doing one specific fiscal period. We could then focus on a specific one. For example, electronic journal subscription. If I want only the electronic journal subscription, I can break it down just by that and do whatever I want to do with this. Could be exported to Excel and further manipulated. Let's say transactions by expenditure and encumbrance per month. So again, we see, like we saw in the previous one, that it spikes up October to December. Now this is comparing the current year with the previous year. We're only in February right now, so it's really not so meaningful, but already when we're on June, July, August, we'll be able to see the comparison from 2022 to 2023. The blue is the current fiscal year, which we can see is only right here because we're only February, but we would have one graph with two lines. It'll be nicer to show at the end of the year or even the middle of the year. This is a nice one. P&E expenditure trends, the purchase, the physical and the electronic. So going back in this case to 2014, the blue is the electronic, the green is the physical. So physical expenditure is coming down. Even with inflation since 2014, the actual number is going down. Whereas altogether, it looks more or less like the electronic, which is the blue line, is remaining constant, even though there was a brief dip between 2021 and 2022. And that covers the basics here of what we want. Let's just do a funds overview for the fiscal period before we actually create a new report. So this is just a general overview, each fund, how much was allocated, how much was encumbered. We'll choose whatever fiscal period we want. And general breakdown, very similar to the funds dashboard that we saw not too long ago. Okay, let's create our own report. I'm going to go back to the chat though, and just see if there's any questions or comments here. I don't see any. It looks like I covered them all. And I'm just going to make a personal note. Person who asked about if there's going to be an advanced session, I'm going to contact you directly just to see what type of topics we would like in that, and maybe we'll do a session dedicated to that, and we'll call it from the beginning advanced. So I have your name and I'll contact you, and thanks for the comment. Okay. And if I missed anyone else's question or comment, feel free to send it in again. All right, so let's now create our own report. Let's say, for example, we want to know which new titles were received in the last month. Now, by the way, I'm going to make this a little smaller. One moment, please. Okay. Here, new titles received in the last month. I'm going to send this page out, which I sent last time, by the way. And when I've created reports today, you could find more information here. So we want to see, for example, new titles, a report of ordered items that have been received in the last 30 days. So let's say, where am I here? Oh, I got the chat. All right, so we're going to do this one here. An Alma Analytics report of all ordered items that have been received in the last 30 days. Many times people will like to have something like this because oh, what am I opening with Firefox? I want to open it with Word. It's a way to know what's new in the institution. It might want to be advertised on a website or whatever. So everything's described right in here. So we're going to make a report in the funds expenditure subject area. Funds expenditure, most of the acquisitions related reports are done in the funds expenditure subject area. So we'll say create analysis. And we'll go to the funds expenditure subject area. And we'll say, what fields do we want to appear here? So we want to know what items were received. So we'll want the title. We probably want the MMS ID as well. So we'll say we want the MMS ID. I'm in the bibliographic details folder. And we want the title. Let's say we also want, what did I add here? Okay, we'll get the purchase order line receiving date and receiving status and the purchase order line number. Let me close that Outlook. Oh, that's just a screenshot. Okay. Let's put the author in here as well. Okay, then we'll get the purchase order line. Let's say we want the purchase order line reference, which is the purchase order line number. And let's get the receiving date. Now, within the receiving date, there's something called last receiving date because theoretically, not just theoretically, it happens quite often, a purchase order line might be for several items, and it might be that they weren't all received on the same date. So we have something called receiving date latest in the purchase order line. And then if there's only one item which was received, then that one item, that one date is the latest date. Now, we want only those received in the last 30 days. So one option to do that would be to say here, filter is greater than or equal to, and then choose 30 days ago. So it's now February 28th. So if I change this to January 28th, I've gotten the last 30 days and I've got my results. However, the problem with that is if I run it in a week, it'll be the last 37 days and not the last 30 days. So instead of hard coding it to a date, we can make an SQL in there. Now, in this same page here, where I just downloaded the file describing how to make such a report, and if I didn't send this out in the chat, I'm going to send it out now. I've sent it out previous times as well. There's one here called How to Use the Timestamp Add. We looked at this in the past. How to use a timestamp add to retrieve by today minus whatever time. And this gives all different kinds of examples. I'm just going to open it just to show all different kinds of examples of how to make an SQL which will give by different dates, last 14 days, last 2 weeks, today, between today and a month from now. So this one's for the future. And there's all different kinds of examples here for all different kinds of time periods, et cetera, et cetera. So you can see it in here. And I'm going to change our report now to do that last 30 days. So within here, all of these are in the last 30 days, as we can see. I have so many here without an author. That's interesting. Okay, there we go. We got some authors. Oh, because a lot of them look like journals. Okay, so let's come back to the criteria tab. And we'll take that filter that we already made here and we'll edit. I'll click the pencil. And I can convert this to SQL right here. And now, instead of this hard-coded date, I can write the SQL syntax, or I can copy it from the PowerPoint. So it's timestamp add, and then SQL TSI, and then it can be year, month, date, day, etc. I'll say day. And then how far back or forward do I want? Let's say -7, even though we called it -30 before. -7, 7 days ago. We'll get a smaller amount of results so we can make sure it really works. From when? From the current date. By the way, if I wanted to know what is this value, I could take any field, let's throw in any field, and I could say edit formula and just change it to that. And now that will display. So if I want to check what is the actual value of what I'm putting in there, let's see what happens. Okay, so 7 days ago, this value 7 days ago is February 21st. So it worked correctly. I'm going to get rid of that now. I just wanted to display it in order to see. And now I should have all of those which were received greater than the last 7 days. So within the last 7 days. Let's see. Here's my purchase order line. Let's sort this ascending. So that should be 221, if I'm not mistaken, if that's what we saw before. Yep. All of these were on 221. And if I say descending, it will theoretically be today. However, we know that the last ETL, the last extract from the analytics was last night, so we're not going to have today as a receiving date. Okay, are there any questions or comments? Let me go back into the chat here. We have 1 minute left. Someone says, is classification data being pulled from the CKB records? I'd like to be able to extract cost per use subject area for resources. If there is a 050 in the bibliographic record, then it will have classification data because it comes from the Library of Congress classification data. Somebody asks, what if you wanted this report to be limited to PO lines from a fund or a fund B? How do you deal with the combination of and or? Okay, if I wanted only certain funds and I wanted or, there's a couple of ways to do that. So I could say I want certain funds, and I would say, let's first just give out the fund code, just so I have an example. So if I want fund code X or fund code Y, we'll do that. I want fund code CJ or this, okay? CJ or that. Okay. So I could say fund code filter is equal to that. And then again, fund code filter is equal to CJ. And then one option is to click this and now it's or. So now I should have one or the other. Only those I have now, as you see. Another option would be to take this and convert it to SQL. I just want to get the syntax. So this is the SQL syntax, copied. Now I'll delete it. Now I have and I'll take this one and also convert it to SQL. And then just say or in the other one. So either way, and anytime, by the way, anytime you click this and, it changes to or, and back and forth. Okay, that covers, we're now at the last time, end of the time. In fact, it's 12:31 local time. So thanks everyone for joining. We already showed where the recordings are. The recordings are on the page of the analytics session, of the analytics series, and we'll be posting again the recording. So thanks, and we hope to see you next week. Have a nice day, everybody. Bye-bye.